Hey guys, I guess the countdown finished just as we came on, so nice. Really quickly, I'll just say hi and invite and welcome everyone to the live stream today. I'm Jason, one of the co-hosts of the Content Marketing Virtual Summit 2021. With me is the other co-host, Sophie Hope, and then we have Ellie Hernaman, who is the head of Truffle Social, and we have also Emily O'Connor, who is the CEO of Content Writers. And just to welcome everyone to the live Q&A today, just to say that we've had an incredible response. Over 12,000 people have joined and participated. And a lot of that is just a credit to the speakers and the quality of the content. And also, I think really having engagement in terms of having people want to learn and get value from what's going on in this space. So I'm really excited about today's live Q&A. And before we get started, I think what I'm going to do is just quickly ask Emily to start by just saying hi and introducing yourself, and then I'll ask Ellie to do the same thing.
Great. Yeah, thank you. It's been awesome to be a part of the conference, so thanks for the opportunity and appreciate just being a part of it. But I'm Emily. I'm the CEO of Content Writers, as mentioned. I'm based out of New York City, so hello to any fellow New Yorkers and those from outside.
Awesome. And Ellie, would you please also say hi?
Hi there. I'm Ellie Hernaman, and I am the CEO of Truffle Social. We're a social media agency based in London.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to go right to the submitted list of questions. And sort of they're kind of really sort of very specific questions. So we'll just rotate through and see how it goes. I'll post the question up. Sophie will be the question asker. It'll go to Emily first, and then the same question will go to Ellie, and then I'll chime in at the end. So that's the rotation. Okay, here we go.
Right. So what is brand identity? I think Emily can speak to this first.
Wow, yeah, starting with the heavy questions. So I would say brand identity is how a company presents itself to the world, its reputation, which can be anything from, as simple as its colors and the way its website looks to its tone of voice and how its content sort of portrays their vibe. I would kind of say that.
To you, Ellie.
Cool. Brand identity is how a brand is perceived by its character and by its nature, and that can be anything from its visual aesthetics, so its color palette and the font that it uses, as well as the tone of voice that it uses within its copy.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear both perspectives and similar shared and strengthening perspectives. And I think one of the things that's interesting about brand identity that I think both Emily and Ellie would say is that it's hard to stand out in the crowd. And one of the things that's really important is to clarify what your brand is standing for. And also there's a lot of things about being consistent. So I think both Ellie and Emily really work with their clients. And this is something, if you're listening, that you can also do, is to really extract the brand identity and let the client know you do care about their brand identity, and you're gonna work to make it even better and stronger, more memorable, and protect what's valuable about it. So let's go to the next question here. And this is an interesting one.
This is a really good one. So how do you get and keep the attention of the target audience? If Emily can speak to this first.
Yeah, great. Well, I think kind of building off of what Jay just said, your brand identity has to be consistent. So having a consistent brand identity and consistent message, and also knowing first who you're trying to reach, can help you get the attention of that target audience. So having a stand of who you are, who you're trying to reach, and then being consistent across your messaging in different platforms and different types of content, so that you can reach them. And obviously there's a lot to that though. So social media, are you sharing? Are you distributing your content in different places? Are you doing SEO so that you show up in organic search? So you need to be clear with how you're communicating, and then you need to be clear with how you're going to reach people and your distribution strategy.
That's awesome.
Now to Ellie.
Cool.
Ellie?
Yeah, so how do you keep the attention for your target audience? Well, there are many different ways, but for us, I always think about things in terms of what the rhythm is, and it's not so much about kind of shouting all the time and going really hard on sales messages. It's very much about making sure that you're managing that rhythm so that you're kind of tapping into key kind of moments when either your audience is most alert, but also providing content that is kind of humming along, still very relevant, but it's not necessarily kind of going all out and shouting. So we have this sort of analogy at Truffle, which we're always banging on about, but it's called sing and shout. And there are definitely times where it's needed, where it's very necessary to hum along and not necessarily go all out. So it's just about making sure that you're kind of making all the right noises at the right times.
Yeah, just one thing I think that's interesting about both, different angles on that. Like, firstly, I think Emily's idea, which is really think about where your readers are and where your audience is, because if you're promoting content into a place where the readers really aren't likely to find it, for example, you're writing about a keyword that nobody's searching on, then you're not going to get the attention or keep the attention of people. Or if your written content isn't relevant to the keyword, like they got to your content, but it's actually a mismatch. And then I think what Ellie said is really cool, because Ellie's talk was on social listening. And so I think it's really nice to have that woven back into the Q&A, because in a sense, with social, it can be very interactive, and therefore you're not necessarily just like, this is our social media plan and we're just going to pump it out no matter what happens. It's like, what are people actually doing? How are they interacting with our social? And then you kind of respond to it through that social listening. I think that's awesome.
I think it's also very much about making sure that you're kind of pivoting your strategy and pivoting your kind of messaging, like your content strategy, so that it's not just, like you said, it's not just broadcasting. It's very much about kind of taking a very human approach, which for me, because I work in social media, it's very much about making sure that you're being quite spontaneous and responsive in a very human way as well. So it's not just broadcast, it's listening to what people are saying, it's listening to how they're behaving, and amending your kind of key messages to make sure that it suits them and appeals to them continually.
Yeah, I really like that. So this is a little bit of a different tack, and it'd be interesting to hear different opinions on this one.
So the question is, how do you feel about pay ads versus organic content? I'll let Emily start with this question.
Yeah, this is a good question. If for content writers, we write primarily content that's about that leads to organic search, or like that's the goal is organic search. So, but you may be surprised to hear me say that I feel that they're both very important. So I won't just beat the drum of organic content, because that's primarily what we do. But we personally, for content writers, we have paid ads. We have a pay-per-click strategy. And then we also have a blog and white paper and organic content strategy, and they work together. So I feel that they're both important marketing strategies. It depends on the industry you're in, and if you're B2B or B2C, and again, who you're trying to reach and where they're at. But I mean, and I'm mainly talking about like Google search ads or even like Microsoft, but obviously there's also Facebook ads and Instagram and social. So, I mean, I think they're both important parts of a comprehensive marketing strategy.
Yeah, I have to say I'm in agreement with Emily in terms of that kind of approach. I feel that they both have relevance, and they've both got a lot of value. It's just sort of how you implement them, really. I am super passionate about great content and making sure that it's high quality. And I wish that we lived in a world where it's just like pure organic will kind of win the race. But because of how saturated all of the kind of messages are in terms of all of the marketing, so it's not just social media, but you've got print ads, you've got TV, you've got radio, you've got everything, and we're constantly bombarded by so many different messages that brands are kind of fighting to make sure that they get out there. So as much as it's nice to be able to kind of go, in an ideal world, right, organic content, there is like strategically what a lot of the platforms have to do is ensure that that you're elevating any content that you really need to get out there to further your audience, or to extend it to audience that you don't already have, is by kind of implementing that paid structure, which then means that marketers like ourselves can kind of be a bit more strategic about, which ones do we see as our hero messages, and which ones do we want to actually put a bit more of a paid media structure around versus the organic, and how does that all work together? So yeah, I think there's they're both really effective, and I love them both, but in very different ways. It's like having children.
Yeah, I think one thing that's just coming up as both Emily and Ellie are sort of bringing your perspective to this, is that with paid, one of the things you can do is really look at the timing of what's going on in the business. If they have like an event or a conference, or they just did something, something's going on, a new product launch, then, in those types of moments, then, having a rapid boost on a few things to really amplify what's going on in the business is essentially creating that rhythm, I think, that you were mentioning earlier. So I think that's a really smart way. I think both answers were really helpful, because essentially, what you're kind of saying is that we have more than one instrument, in our band, in our orchestra. So it's really producing the right kind of system of support for what's going on in that business, not even just as a business, but even just like what's going on this month, what's going on this season, what's going on with your events, what's going on in the industry. So I think that's really cool. So here is another quick one. Not so quick, maybe. We'll see.
Right. So the question is, how do you create long-term value for clients through your type of content? Emily.
Yeah. Great question. Well, since, as I mentioned, like we primarily do content that is for organic search. That type of content, if you're producing evergreen content, it can produce web traffic for years. Granted, it's smart to refresh your content, because Google can see how recent it was, and they might prioritize more recent work. But if you're producing blog content or white papers or anything that's not gated, that's just like, it can be indexed, that can produce search results for years and years if it stays on your blog or your site. So I mean, you can get value out of that from when you publish it till whenever. We get hits on blogs that we wrote like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that leads people reaching out needing content writing services. So and so do our clients. So basically, if you're producing content that's optimized and that's valuable to your audience, like that it's a topic that they care about, it provides actionable insights and things like that, and then it's something that has a keyword that's searchable, that people can find it, and then they might reach out to you for services, and you can build trust with them and things like that through your content. So I mean, I would say with blogs and white papers and other long form content, this is like that's a huge benefit, is that it's an asset that continues to produce results for you for as long as it's up on your site.
Cool. Ellie.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question, and I'm sort of, in all honesty, racking my brains about how best to answer this, because with social media, it's a completely different ball game when it comes to SEO. It works differently. So if we're talking about type content, it is slightly different, because when we plan our social media strategies, we're always bearing in mind the fact that on social media, the beauty of it, but also the difficulty or challenge with it is all platforms have quite a short shelf life. So if you're thinking about Instagram, you might post something up there, and you can use the right hashtags, which is definitely one way of kind of helping drive value and reach. But they are not going to be always kind of up at the top forever. So it's very much about making sure that you are using your kind of content pillars and your key messages and repeating those over time, so that you're actually drumming back that message, and so that it's always kind of front of mind. And so what we'll often do is we'll understand or define what are the real kind of key content pillars and the key messages for any client upfront, or any brand, and we'll then go, right, well, how are we actually going to make sure that this is repeated constantly, but in new innovative ways where it's not kind of too repetitive. And so it's with social media, it's very much about making sure that you're finding new creative ways to say the same thing, but in terms of, you know, how is it going to actually tap into the current zeitgeist? How is it going to be relevant now? And how are we also kind of putting a new spin on things, so that we're so that it's still the same message, but relevant with what's going on right now with that target audience.
I think that's really awesome. I love it. I think both answers are very interesting, and I think really quite appropriate too. One is, you know, SEO and written content, where blogs can last a long, long time. You know, essentially, you know, to Emily's point, when somebody's searching on Google and they find something that's written even 6 months ago, as long as it's not out of date, it's still exactly what they need right now. So as far as they're concerned, as long as it's not as long as the information is still, you know, accurate and relevant, and many things don't change that quickly. It's just like that's what they needed right now. If I want to know, you know, there's so many things that you can learn about, you know, through blogs that were written 6 months ago, a year ago, etc. But I really also think, Ellie, your thought process around this is so interesting, because you really see it as like a river in which your clients are sort of like, they can benefit from that river, but they also have to deal with the current of that river. And in a way, there's two different types of expertise, and clients really need both of you. They need someone who can think in terms of long term, and they need somebody who can understand that river, the flowing current of social. So I mean, that's such a cool awareness that you're bringing to clients and helping clients with. This one might be a little bit controversial based on what you just said, and I think, but it's relevant to both of you. We'll see. You know, if this makes sense.
So, right, what is evergreen content? So Emily first.
Yeah, well, I just mentioned that buzzword. So if anybody's playing buzzword bingo over there, mark your square. So what is evergreen content? I would say evergreen content is the opposite of what Ellie was talking about a bit earlier, about like topical, what are people caring about right now? It's what are people going to always care about, sort of, you know, so as opposed to something that's like related to a current event or a trend. Evergreen is something that's always going to be important, or you know, is always going to be relevant, I would say. So like that's what you should focus a lot of your SEO content on, because it does take time for results even to generate on SEO. So if like that's your goal, you want to focus on something that's going to matter 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, not something that's sort of a trend that's going to pass more quickly.
Yeah, I think I'll follow on from Emily. I think she's summed it up better than I could. But yeah, it's very much the same actually in social media. But for us, it's less about the content always being there. It's more about the content reflecting key messages that carry the kind of same message. So it's evergreen, meaning it will always be relevant. For us, it's just about how do we make sure that we're using that message and spinning it in a slightly different way. It's always still the actual same sentiment that's being put out there, but it will forever be relevant to your audience.
Yeah, I mean, one question that I have to sort of follow up with Ellie is that there are quite a lot of companies that have made sort of technologies, right, for reposting and resharing and evergreen socials. So just quickly, do you think those are helpful, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I definitely think it's that they're helpful. I mean, we use lots of different kind of pieces of software for us to churn some of the same content, but what we always do. So, for example, with Twitter, that's my favorite platform to. And I don't want to use the word churn because it sounds like we literally copy and paste. But what we do is we'll take the same copy and we'll then go, right, how are we going to actually use this to repurpose it in many different ways, being inspired by the first piece of content that we wrote in the first place. We can write it in 100 different new ways off the back of that first piece, and it will still be relevant. We're just making sure that we're not directly copying and pasting it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So it's sort of like there's a basic message there, but there's a different sort of way of positioning it. And so it's a little bit more sophisticated, I think, than with the way a lot of people use those tools.
Yeah, I think the other thing also with this is you can still also take the same message or piece of content, but repurpose it across different platforms as well. And the wonderful thing about social media is there are so many platforms, and the way that audiences engage on those platforms are completely different from each other. So there's also variety there, which allows us to kind of pick up on the nuance and repurpose things in different ways so that the same message is going out, but in different ways to serve the audiences and how they work on those platforms.
Yeah, that's good. I really like that too, which is essentially you're saying that it's not just about the same platform, but you can actually migrate around different things. And so there could be different formats, there could be different angles, and yeah, it's a family of platforms. That's pretty cool. All right, so we'll do this one, and I think we'll see how this one goes.
So the next question is, what kind of research do you do before starting a campaign?
Yeah, well, so for content writers, we don't really do campaign. Well, I mean, if I were going to talk about like the client work we don't really do like campaigns. It's more just like ongoing content. Like there's a content strategy that somebody has like a certain amount of content that they want to produce every month, and then we're consistently producing that content. It's more about like that steady stream, and it's less like campaign based. But so I would maybe shift the way I'm going to answer it, like as if what research do I do before I start working with a new client, which is to find out who their target audience is. So who are they trying to reach? We've discussed. What are their goals? So is it engagement? Is it to hit those sort of more topical of the moment topics, or is it to create the evergreen content or rank in organic search? So find out who they're trying to reach, what their goals are. I look at their competitors. So like, who else is in the space? What are they saying? And then, we try to get a brief from them too, if they have any like tone of voice guides or things like that. If there's any established brand for them, it's important for us to know that so that we can maintain that tone of voice.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting answer to kind of reframe it. So now to Ellie.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we do something quite similar. We'll normally host what we call an immersion session with the client, and then we like to be quite collaborative about things and make it a collaborative exercise where we feel like often, not always, but we know we have a pretty good idea of what their objectives are and what they're looking to achieve, who their target audience is, and who their competitors are. So we'll put that all together in a presentation beforehand, but then we'll also kind of open it up to the room so that we can really exhaust some of those questions and really kind of dig deep on those so that we can extract as much information that quite often the client might not even know themselves, and we'll kind of stress test a lot of it as well, so that we're finding out as much as we possibly can, because a lot of the time also the brands will have a rough idea of what they want to achieve, but they'll also be kind of secretly, I don't know, envious of another competitor brand who's doing things in different ways, but they won't have communicated that with their own team, for example. So we'll really kind of get under the skin of things as much as we can to understand, what are their real objectives and what are their priorities as well. So, a lot of brands will say, oh, we want to get 1 million followers and we want to get like maximum engagement. We want everything to go viral. We want this, that, and the other. Oh, we've got no budget. So then you go, right, well, look, let's be a bit more realistic about things. How are we going to achieve this? So it's also kind of like we'll come to them and go, right, let's be real about stuff, and we'll also present to them other findings that we've through our experience and our knowledge and through the campaigns that we've run, as well as presenting to them what other brands have done, not just their competitors, but other brands maybe within the space or who have done things creatively that we've looked at, who we think that actually they're running with a strategy that we think can be paralleled or replicated, but just with our own different spin on things. So yeah, it's very much about kind of like putting it out there, seeing what's going on in the broader landscape, and then honing in on some kind of key objectives, and then finally kind of presenting about those deliverables.
So just really kind of hearing again both different angles on that. From Emily's point of view, research starts with looking at the audience, looking at what of the competitors are doing, and so on. And I think that was really, it's helpful to know that there is a process that goes in, and you are really looking at those things up front, so that the content is based on and having done quite a bit of research. And then from Ellie's point of view, I think what I thought was really interesting was that you're utilizing research to even frame the conversation with the client as well, and creating a context, like this is the context in which we're going to perform. And so that's really fascinating, and it also can inform the work that's done as well. So I think this is kind of a similar question, but maybe it's okay because it gives a chance to sort of take it at a different angle. I think we were touching on this, but it's a little bit of a different angle. We'll see how it goes.
So can you talk about strategy versus execution in your type content?
Yeah, I would consider strategy sort of like part of the preparation. So you're, defining those goals. It is, I would say probably my answer is going to be pretty similar to what I just said. But yeah, I would say strategy is part of that preparation. So you're defining the goals, what are you trying to achieve, who you're trying to reach, all that kind of stuff. But then you're also figuring out exactly how. So it's like the why sort of and the what, but also the how. So that you can like have a full plan, I guess. And then the execution is actually doing that plan. So like who are the people involved? What are the timelines? Where do we work together? Like, is there a project management tool or something that we're using? So, I mean, I hope that's comprehensive enough, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think it is. That's helpful. Yeah. Ellie?
Yeah, so strategy and execution. Well, we always want to implement an ongoing strategy and make sure that we're checking in on the progress of what we're doing in terms of the rollout of the campaigns, and ensuring that everything is kind of on point with what we laid out up front. But yeah, strategy, what we normally do is we'll upweight that strategy work at the very beginning so that we've kind of laid out all of the foundations for a solid rollout, and that will often look like a giant 100-page social media playbook that the client can also then take away for themselves, and they'll go, right, okay, well, we know exactly where we stand and what we need to do moving forward as well, and we understand like why they've outlined it like this, and then we'll get to grips with getting it done. But I think when it comes to the actual execution, one of the things that we do on the ongoing kind of packages, we'll have set weeks within the course of the month where we'll go, okay, well, this week we're analyzing all of the data from the previous month and we're providing recommendations. The next week it's, right, we're putting together all of the new kind of creative concepts and ideation. We'll send that over to the client and or create it from the get-go. Then we'll get everything signed off. We'll do all the work with the designers. So there is some structure throughout the course of the month when and while the audiences will see that there's a lovely kind of trickle of content that's constantly and consistently going out, whereas behind the scenes there's a huge amount of strategy that is going on, as well as the kind of scheduling and the posting and community management and all of that great stuff.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two or three critical things. So one thing, I think, Emily, your talk was on workflows. So in terms of workflows and different roles, execution is something very, very, you've given a lot of thought to it, and that's something you really bring to the forefront of how you provide consistent quality, is by having a proofreader, having editor, being clear on the different roles, and so really have given a lot of thought to the execution side, as well as the research and the setup. And I really think, Ellie, your thoughts on this were so interesting, because when I heard what you said, it's almost like the strategy is almost its own product. That someone could even pay you and just say, come in and just help to develop my social media strategy, and you think of it that way, whether they do or they don't. You think of it that way. You're like, this is actually something that's going to serve them, period, right? We're doing this to serve them. It's really like, something very valuable in its own right.
Yeah, and it's almost tangible. Like if we were to print off that playbook, it would just be like a giant kind of bound book that they could just sit on their desk. And we've done that before for clients, so that they've got a point of reference and something that they understand as something solid and valuable. And also because of the way that we have to do things, like some brands just purely need strategy, and they go, well, we've got an in-house team, they can do it, and they're all completely competent, capable, proficient individuals. But what we lack is that initial strategy and the kind of the in-depth thinking and expertise to really nail that. So we have to be able to deliver just that as a one-off project. And whenever it comes to us proposing this to clients, we're very clear on how we structure that we start with a strategy, and that's covered off, and then we literally give it to them, and then we can either say, see you later, good luck with everything, or hopefully we'll take it on and we'll do it ourselves. But so it's a piece of work, but it should be continued as well in all of the kind of ensuing work that then gets rolled out.
So this question, I think, is a little bit of a different angle, and there's a couple of different questions that touch on this theme. So we'll start with this one and see how this one goes.
It's a good one. How do you dial into the right amount of clients' involvement?
Yeah, this is It's a good question, and it really depends on the client, you know, because and the right amount. Wow, yeah, it's hard to say what that is because that will vary based on the project, who you're working with, like that. So the project you're completing, like how big is it? What types of content? What are you are trying to achieve? And then who are you working for? You know, who's the client? And they sometimes will really want to be involved, and sometimes they won't want to be involved at all. And getting to the middle ground of like the right amount of involvement is a diplomatic process. So I think you know, you need to kind of set your expectations really early on. We like to do this, like we have in our sales process, there's like an initial discovery call, there's a proposal, there's probably other calls to like sort of discuss that proposal more and get a better sense of who they are and what and who we are. And we try to be really clear about who we are and how we like to work and where we find work to be most effective. So I think just making sure that that's woven into the process of the sales process. So you're setting the expectation early on that you want them to give feedback. You may expect more feedback. Like we love to get the most feedback in the first month or two, because then we know like we can use that feedback for like, so let's say we're working with a client for a year. If we start and they don't give us any feedback and then they give us feedback in the third month, we're like everybody who worked on that with them so far is kind of confused because you thought like everything was okay. So the right amount of involvement is really for them to be more involved at the front end. So if you're going to expect that and you're going to want that, you should kind of be like making sure that you're weaving that into your sales process and setting that expectation so they can get the right people involved, because it might not be your main point of contact. They might have a reviewer or something like that, and you need that person's input. So you want them to be lining up those pieces early on. And then like you want to set, like for us, that would be, you know, in the first month, in the first 2 months, please be available to give feedback. Here are going to be your feedback deadlines. We set like specific deadlines. We're going to deliver on these dates. Please give your feedback by this date. Granted, does it always happen that way? No, but you should set those guardrails so that you're at least like, you know, putting that out there, that everybody sees, that everybody knows that if you're giving them extra time, they, you know, like it was already agreed on that there was a date. But so how do you dial it in? You set the expectations. You know what that client involvement, that you have to know for your service what's the optimal amount and try to set the expectation to get there. And if, you know, it's a whole other ball game if you're trying to sort of get somebody who's too involved to sort of pull back, or someone who's not involved at all to like lean in. But I think starting from setting the expectation at the beginning gets you on the right foot at least.
Yeah, really interesting. Ellie, what are your thoughts on this one?
I totally agree, and I've learnt the hard way many times, and I still am. So yeah, I mean, I think definitely setting the expectations early on is so key. But that said, like you can never completely manage that. You just don't know how either passionate or uninvolved your client might want to be, and it is different for every single one. So yes, setting the expectations early on is really important, but also throughout, if you feel that you are starting to kind of give more than you'd at first kind of laid out in your service level agreement, it's really important to make sure that you're either kind of allowing for a little bit of flexibility internally, which we always like to do because we want to go over and above where possible, and when it also is when it makes sense to us in terms of our own resources internally. But that choice should land with you. It should not be an expectation from the client. So when it does come to doing a little bit extra here and there, it's quite important to make sure that you're letting them know politely and in a very kind way, so that they can then say, that's really nice of them, I'm grateful for that, as opposed to those people, you know, they did a great job last month and now suddenly they're like pulling back, and why this and so it's very much about kind of managing expectations. And there really is a true art that I'm still trying to figure out on how that is communicated with clients, because it doesn't always go your way.
Yeah, I was just thinking as I was listening to both, thoughts on this. The first one is that if the client can learn more about sort of what has worked for your other clients, and you sort of give them like, this is almost like, this is sort of what it's like, if imagine anything that people do, right? This is like, you're going to go to this country. This is what you're going to expect when you arrive. It's going to be like this, and you're going to go through this process and this process. So I think if they have that feeling, oh, you've actually helped people like go through this many times, I can sort of fit myself into that. That's nice. But the other thing that came up in my mind is, especially in social media, I can just imagine clients wanting to be interviewed or wanting to like really be involved in like choosing the colors or the photos. I just imagine like all kinds of
things their minds as well, because I mean, social media is the lovely thing about it is social media never sleeps and it's constantly changing, and nor do I ever sleep apparently. So, but like it's constantly changing, and we're there to be ready and reactive, and we want to do that, but we've got to kind of be allowed to, we've got to be trusted to make those right kind of moves wherever. And I think sometimes whenever we kick off campaigns, we start to create this content that has taken a completely new turn to what has been done previously. And the clients often go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And they're constantly looking at things. And because they're suddenly spending so much time using social media all of a sudden, because they're feeling inspired by the stuff that we're doing, which is really positive. The kind of harder side to that is that they then start to go, right, I'm gonna be like really involved in it. So it's one of those things where you're going, okay, cool, yes, we want to say yes to everything, but hold your horses a little bit sometimes. Like, let us just kind of do our job. Or pay more. We'll do more.
Well, I think it's also like, it's tricky, right? If you could schedule in like, this is your session A, and then this is your session B, and this is what you're going to do here. And if you want more sessions, it's going to be a little bit extra. I mean, that's not easy, but I can't imagine that would be easy. I mean, I just can't. And even for my agency, I've got some clients that literally just want to, if they have a question, they just literally want to get on a call, and I'm like, wow. So it's pretty interesting, actually. And I've had clients like bring up their entire dashboard for their whole business and walk me through it. I'm like, I'm not sure I need to know all of this right now. I mean, that's a different type of service that you'd be paying for. So this is a question, I think, that is a fair question, and I think you probably will have different points of view on this.
Right. So what are the key metrics you report to clients, and how often do you do that?
Yeah, so just to comment quickly on what was just said, I totally agree that towing the line between wanting to go above and beyond for your client and wanting them to understand that you are doing that and may not always be able to do that, or that you may need to renegotiate certain things to sort of be paid for what you're doing, it is challenging. But so key metrics, for us, it's sort of like an interesting part of our business, or maybe not interesting, but that we don't do like content performance. So our content writers does content creation, and we're really good at that. And that's what we focus on. So we have amazing writers, amazing editors, and we will create amazing content for you that is unique. What happens next is sort of up to our clients. So they publish it, and then they have like their own sort of like measuring and things. What they do measure is where they rank on search. That's a big one. How much like traffic they're getting. They also we have a lot of e-commerce clients, so they're measuring revenue, like they're measuring sales. Some of our other clients are measuring, just overall traffic and then lead generation. So lead forms, like are people filling out, like reading the blog and then filling out like to get more information, that kind of thing. But I mean, traffic and conversions are the biggest ones. So whether the conversion is an e-commerce sale or a form fill. And then, I mean, key metrics we actually report that are like not marketing metrics per se are like how many pieces did we write, in what period of time, what types, how long were they, like what writers did we use, that kind of a thing.
Very interesting. Not a very interesting answer. So Ellie, what about you?
We report on all sorts. So it used to be, oh, you know, how many followers can you get for me in a month? And I think social media has kind of developed so much since then, although we do report on that and audience growth. But it's not so much as you know, likes and comments even. It's about the general sentiment. It's about how much engagement we're driving, how much traffic we're also driving back to the websites or whichever kind of lead gen campaigns we're running. So it really is all sorts with social media, and it is forever changing, and it's also very different across all of the platforms. So one of the things that we're actually encouraging a lot of our clients to consider, and a lot of them are quite reluctant because they're quite traditional companies, many of them, and then others are a lot more kind of adventurous and innovative. But with TikTok, for example, this is the new platform that everyone's kind of dabbling in, and it's got a very young audience, and they're super engaged. So we're saying to any clients who are saying, look, we want we're really interested in engagement, we'll go, right, well, you need to think about TikTok, not just, you know, exclusively, but we'll think about the brand and whether it's right for them. But TikTok is getting, for example, 5 times more engagement than Instagram. So there's a huge kind of value tip across the platforms as well, and there are all sorts of new ones coming out. So whenever it comes to metrics, we'll have our kind of standard reporting tools, and we know the structure of that, and we'll kind of run through like how many impressions did we get and how many visits to the website, etc. But we'll also then go, right, in terms of your objectives, how are we making sure that we're leading you on which platforms to be using and how we should be kind of using content across all of those. So, and there are so many different variables as well. So it's always a bit of a game that is never won.
Well, I think that's a really cool answer. I'm not going to comment on that too much because we only have a few minutes left, and there's a couple of really, I think, pretty interesting questions. We'll see how you guys feel about this, but I think it's an interesting one. So let's try this one out. This is a pretty one that you could do a lot with. So Sophie, go for it. Let's see how it goes.
Right. So the question is, you are now the CMO of a brand new startup with market supplements for women, and your budget is 100K. And how much do you spend on pay ads, on organic social and also organic content?
Wow, I feel like I'm on like an interview to be for that CMO job. Oh, and you just gave me a question.
Well, anyone could be listening. You could get a call tomorrow.
Oh gosh, like I'm on the hot seat. Can I phone a friend?
You can phone Ellie.
Right? Yeah. So
if you don't like that question, if you don't like that question, you don't have to take that one. We can move to another one. We can go around.
What were the 3 categories? I mean, I don't know that
I think what the question is kind of coming to is like a lot of times, like as agency owners, we work within the framework of someone else's ideas of what they want, and this is sort of like kind of you get to choose, and you get to choose anything and everything, right? Essentially about it. You're kind of the boss in this case, right? You could even go further and say you're the founder, right? You're the founder with all your experience. So sort of like if you have that blank check, you have that blank, startup check, it could be more than 100K, it could be 300K, 500K. What would you do? Like, how would you start it out? It's a brand new startup. You're kind of breaking into a crowded market. There's a lot of supplements for women already, obviously. So what would your like gut feeling be, like how you would lay that out? Would you start with paid, then would you add in, or social, or how would you do that?
Well, to split the budget, I would probably do 40% paid ads, 30% each of the other categories. You want to have your paid ads to get in front of those people, like in front of your potential audience. You're brand new, so it's going to take you time to rank on organic written content. So you should be investing in it, but it's a long-term investment. So more near-term, you want to be doing paid ads and also social to be getting people. Well, so the social will also have to grow. You're going to start with 0 followers, or maybe the 5 people that are part of your company and your mom, hopefully. So, you know, you need to start that, but it's going to take time to develop both the social following and the organic traffic. So you want to do the paid ads, and I would put the majority there, but then you still need a good amount on the other 2 so that you're building for the longer term. That's probably how I would do it.
Interesting. And for the paid, if you were doing supplements, you know, for this type of, let's say, just make it even more specific. Yeah, let's just say supplements. Would you go with Google ads, or would you go with the social media ads?
I do more on social because I'm assuming we're selling to consumers. So I would do social, and I would maybe even, can we put like influencers in there? Like I would also, I would probably hire some influencers like in the wellness community.
Yeah, I think you teed it up for Ellie. What are your thoughts?
Yes, you have. She's gone and stolen my answer. I mean, I would approach it quite similarly. I'd probably start by going, right, organic written, I'll put 20% worth into a bucket for. And then I would, I'd split the rest. But what I would do when it comes to the paid ads is I'd probably take like 10% and then trial it out, do some A/B testing, figure out what's working. And then I'd also do the same with working with influencers and just doing some testing, seeing what works. And then with like obviously put a good like 30% towards the organic and make sure that's all like perfectly done. And then anything remaining, just chuck it onto what's performed the best, so that you're optimizing things and being smart with it, making money sweat.
I like it. I think what's interesting about both answers is sort of understanding that you're new. So there's kind of like, you have to get things moving quickly, get the data flowing, and in a way with the paid ads, you can learn faster. So you're paying more upfront to get that learning, and then that can influence what you're doing in the other channels. Then whatever's working, you can actually accelerate, and you've got the testing going on. So it's very cool answer. I think we've got one more question. Time for one more question. And I think there's a bunch of really interesting ones, like things about client briefs and discovery calls and all that, but I'm just going to go with this one.
So what trends do you see emerging in your type of content?
Softer question. For us, actually, it's been like so top of mind, the idea of featured snippets, and people also ask questions on Google because the majority of clicks and traffic for organic are going to those. If there's people also ask box, or there's a featured snippet for the search, people are either just reading that and not even clicking on anything, or just reading that and then clicking on that result or one of those results. So if you're not one of those results, your traffic is just like even if you're like the 5th, it's just not as good as if you were in one of those results. So we really see a big trend toward writing long form content that is optimized for those elements within Google's sort of like search pages.
That's an interesting trend. Ellie, what about for you?
Yeah, with social media, everything is going even more towards video content, but people are starting to really embrace moving away from the overly polished look of things, which is a good thing in some ways, but it's also kind of like, now we've got used to spending so much time like getting the quality like perfect. All of a sudden it's fine for people to just be like taking loads of selfie videos and things like that on their phones unedited, and it's just like out there. So volume is really, really key. Everyone's kind of just like getting stuff out constantly and super frequently. So that's one thing. But also within the actual kind of content itself, brands, I'd say, brands are kind of looking more towards being as meaningful as possible and authentic as possible. So as far as the kind of actual subject topics and of the content that they're actually pushing out, it's all about having that kind of bigger purpose. And I'm sure, Emily, you're probably working on a lot of purpose-led content as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a I think to summarize just quickly, the two things are, one, Google. If you're doing organic content, then you're just essentially, if Google does something, and there's some tools that I'm sure Emily knows about as well that measure the percent of searches that result in clicks, and it's different for different keywords. So it's really fascinating. So some keywords, you're not going to get very many clicks through to your actual post, and others will have a much higher, especially ones that are sort of questions that have facts embedded in them. Then Google will just provide the answer, like, what is the population of Maine, and then the answer is right there. But Ellie, I think your answer, your thought, and then just tying that into how you write your content, and I think and structure this featured snippets and get in that box. But I think, Ellie, your answer is also really interesting on this one, because you're sort of have your pulse on what's going on with brands and what's going on with social, and you're helping brands to understand that what worked last year maybe is different than what's going to work this year, and people are looking for something different. And I didn't have time to ask the question, but it ties a little bit into what the world's been through in the last year with people having lockdowns and businesses being closed, and a lot of people going through a really tough time, a lot of people. So in a sense, it also has opened the door for people to be a little bit more vulnerable and want to see that in the brands that they're interacting with. So
empathetic, I think. Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting. So I just want to, we're at the very tail end here, coming down to the wire. I just want to say thank you to both panelists, not panelists, live Q&A guests and speaker, something like a panelist. So thank you so much, Emily, for being here today. And thanks so much also, Ellie, for being here. And to all of the people who participated, who registered, who came and watched, I just hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are, and that you're getting the most value from this conference. So you're learning a lot, you're writing things down, you're taking action, and that you gained a lot of value from the live stream tonight. So thanks again, Ellie, as well, and Emily, and Sophie as well.
Can I get you guys on Instagram stories? I'm going to do it.
Sure.
And I am joining these wonderful people from the Content Marketing Virtual Summit. And we've just done our live Q&A. Watch this.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry, guys. I always have to do that.
That's great.
Love it. Yeah.
I'll do one. I'm not going to do an Instagram story, but I'll just do a photo of us, which is probably very, I don't know how big this is going to be. We'll try. So have a wonderful day, everyone, wherever you are. And see you next time. Tomorrow's a full day of speakers, so make sure you tune in for that. And we'd love to hear. Please make sure the speakers know that you've enjoyed their talks. And thanks again for participating. Bye, everyone. See you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.